Hey everyone, it's Jeannie for Not Too Shabby, and today I am sharing this Christmas card that uses non-traditional Christmas colors. I'm using the Cup of Cheer stamp set along with a knit diamond stencil. So starting off with this stencil, this came from a previous subscription box, and you can definitely use any stencil you have on hand. I just picked this one because it has segregated areas for each of the diamonds, and I kind of wanted to do a bunch of ink blending and use the Christmas rainbow. So when I talk about the Christmas rainbow, it isn't very different from the general rainbow, but I only use colors from red, orange, yellow, and green. And because of the red and the green that bookend the colors, it just looks more Christmassy. What I did is I decided to section this off by the rows of the diamonds, and the first row will be red. So I'm using two different distress inks in shades of red, and then the next row will be orange, and I'm using a different color for each of the diamonds as well. You can pull out whatever you have in your ink stash and use a variety of colors, or you can just use one color. That's fine too. You can definitely do whatever you want with this, but for me, I wanted it just to be a little bit more concise and specific to the diamonds. I wanted to keep within the color family. I thought it would be fun and a fun use of the stencil, because usually with stencils I use one or two colors and do some ink blending, and I don't really rely on the pattern itself in the stencil. So it's a little different from my usual, but I am keeping a running list of the things that I want to do and incorporate in my cards, and so this was one of the ones that was on my list, which was kind of masking off while stenciling to create a fun and bright pattern. This just worked really well with this particular stencil, but I am sure you have tons of stencils in your stash to be able to achieve the same look. For the greens, it wasn't as bright as I wanted. I believe this is crushed olive, which is kind of a duller green, but it worked. I moved on to stamping out my image for this card, and I'm using the little cup of cocoa from Cup of Cheer. Cup of Cheer is the stamp and die of the month, and I'm only using the stamp set for today, and I will be coloring it up using Copic markers. I'm not doing anything super duper fancy because these images are a little bit smaller. The only area that is large enough for me to use like 3 different Copic markers is the main cup. Everything else I'm just using 2, putting the darker areas where the shadows are and then coloring up the rest of the space. I had debated whether I wanted to use kind of a variety of colors for this cup, but I thought that I would keep it very Christmassy with red and green, because I imagine that this cup is going to be in the center of my card panel, and because the red and green kind of bookend this rainbow, it would just work really well together. I also wanted to pull in gold, because gold, green, and red, it just makes it even more holiday-y and Christmassy. So I was really excited to do that. You can see that I'm just coloring up the cup and finishing it up. I tried to use 2 different types of greens for the design and the cup itself, and I realized after I colored up the entire cup that the design was kind of lost because the colors were so similar. So I actually went back in with a darker green just to make that design pop. And sometimes that happens. I have another video where, I totally color up an image and totally change it, and that just sometimes happens. I find that I have such a hard time picking a color palette, and even with colors that are pretty much set for Christmas, I still struggled. So if you have the same struggles as me, know that you're not alone. So I'm just finishing up this little cup, and what I imagined for this card was I was going to put him in the center of my card panel and have him along with the sentiment, and it would be a really simple card. I decided that I wanted to fussy cut him out. He's a pretty simple image to cut out, so it wasn't too hard. If you have the dies, then you're all set and you can just die cut it. So for the sentiment, I decided that I wanted to use the larger one in the stamp set, and I wanted to stamp it on vellum. I am incorporating the gold here by stamping it with Versamark ink, and then I'm covering up the sentiment using gold embossing powder. Then I'll go ahead and heat set that, and with vellum you want to be kind of careful when you're doing heat embossing, because you definitely don't want to warp the vellum. So I usually let my heat gun run for about 30 seconds just so it gets really hot, and then bring it to the vellum, just that's just to prevent any extra warping. Because I have that gold embossing for the sentiment, I wanted to incorporate gold in another way as well. So I decided to pull out another piece of A2 cardstock, and I trimmed down my main card panel about 1/4 of an inch on the top and the bottom, and then 1/4 of an inch on the right and left side. This will allow this card panel that I'm heat embossing to peek through. So I just covered up the edges with Versamark ink and covered it with gold embossing powder, and I'm gonna go ahead and heat set that. That way I'll have the gold embossing powder match with the mat that this card is on. I just love doing this because it's such an easy trick. It's an easy way to incorporate the same colors all around. So I went ahead and glued down my little cup on my vellum piece, and I pull out a piece of Stick It double-sided adhesive. Normally you want to do this ahead of time because you want to be able to cut your piece and already have the adhesive on the back of it, so you don't have any stray adhesive on the sides and things will get sticky and whatnot. But I totally forgot, and so I just pulled out a piece of the Stick It and I placed my vellum piece right on top of it, and then I took it to my guillotine cutter and just trimmed it down just by maybe less than 1/8 inch, just so I could get the vellum piece without the stickiness from the Stick It adhesive. So you want to do this before you start cutting down your pieces, but I just forgot, and this was the only way that I could add the double-sided adhesive. So I went ahead and just stuck it on the panel, and it really makes it pop because of the vellum. And then I matted it on top of that cardstock that I had heat embossed gold all over. So yeah, that's it for today's card. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next time with another video. Bye!